names, how many different greetings I need to say, from She to Ni Hao to Obrigado and other things from Brazil and Spanish. So it's going to be tough. I'm going to stay with hello then.
Absolutely. So this is what Simao is. Welcome to 98th session of National Medical Association. We are live today on Saturday, 19th of February. And we are joining in from a lot of countries. As Doctor mentioned that how many welcomes he has to do in different languages. So today we are here for another important topic. We are discussing on virus COVID-19 registry, and we have somebody special here. We have Dr. Rahul Kashyap. He's a division director for research at TriStar division at HCA Healthcare in Tennessee. He holds an academic rank and assistant professor in anesthesiology in College of Medicine, Mayo Clinic, USA. He's a co-editor of the book Mayo Clinic Critical Care Case Review. He's widely published, an author of more than 300 journals and over 5,500 citation of over 10 book chapters. He has a lead several national and international clinical studies and registries and trial. Most recently, he has been a lead investigator for the virus COVID-19 registry. I will share the link with everyone in the group after this meeting. With the collaboration of Mayo Clinic and Society of Critical Care Medicine, which was first of its kind. During this early pandemic in March 2020. He was granted award for foundation from Foundation Industries and government agencies for the clinical research work in the past 10 years. A very warm welcome to Dr. Rahul Kashyap. And we have with us all the Simao countries from various parts of the world. And to join this session, we have Dr. Chong, who is also the chair for Simao, and the president-elect, Dr. Wazi. Over to you, Dr. Kashyap.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal, for warm welcome. I'm sharing my slides. Please let me know if you guys can see my slides right here. All right, fantastic. So a couple of disclaimer, I do not represent any organization today. It's just a matter of presenting a global registry. And then probably I'm here to share our story, a global story of this registry, learn from you all. I may not be able to provide definite answers for treatment, but I can shed some light of some publications have come out into it as well, and we can definitely take questions. So virus stands for Viral Infection and Respiratory Illness Universal Study, a COVID-19 registry, and I'm privileged and honored and thankful for the invite and to be sharing with you, probably seeking questions and networking and collaboration. If you're interested on this topic or any other topic for that matter, we should be able to find some collaborations there. Please stop me if you have any questions in between. Otherwise, I plan to finish in like 30 to 40 minutes, and then we should have plenty of time for questions and answers. Keep writing your questions in chat box, and I anticipate our moderator can help us in the end going through these questions, and I can go one by one in the end as well. And those who are live tweeting right now, please use @COVID-19 registry handle, my own handle as well, and you can type in hashtag Stop Virus Collaboration or SCCM social media SO me as well. Just housekeeping part, you're all used to Zoom, so there's no Q&A session today. Raise hand or write down in the chat box as well. And if it is not for you, feel free to leave the meeting. I hope that it doesn't get to that point. I understand that you are from different reasons, so I will try to be as brief as possible, but by all means, I'll be happy to answer questions as we go along. Dr. Agarwal, Mr. Agarwal already provided some introduction as well. Research is my bread and butter. That's what I'm doing for many, many years now as well. And privileged to be working with great minds on book chapters, books, as well as these registry and publication. My interests are in acute care research and quality improvement project. And I'm interested in mentoring, global mentoring as well for young minds, junior faculty members, fellows, resident, especially international medical graduates. So those who are joining us on Twitter, check out our space called Mentoring in Healthcare. And we're talking about email etiquettes in less than 36 hours on Twitter. Some disclosures, this registry, it was supported by the grants from Mayo Clinic itself, Gordon Betty Moore Foundation in the United States, Janssen and Research and Development, and recently with FDA's Cure ID project. Some of the CDC grant has come through at this point. I had some grants from NIH, NHLBI, but they are for unrelated clinical research prior to COVID-19 work. In next 30 to 40 minutes, I plan to show you or introduce the registry, which has been ongoing for now almost 2 years. Initial dashboard, we have it, which is a publicly available dashboard. Feel free to use it, see it, and cite it. And then some initial publication came out. Now the list is ever growing. I cannot cover all the publications coming out from it, but I will touch upon a little bit on data harmonization and how it is a major issue. And people on this call, I've got a chance to listen to the earlier discussion. I think you guys are well suited to actually answer some of these things or provide a collaboration where if we can have a global data harmonization, consensus on clinical definitions or data definitions, I think we can do a lot as our preparation for next pandemic. We're almost done with this one, or at least we have missed the boat in doing the data harmonization, but I think we could be prepared for the next one. Some ancillary study, core studies concept, which we will welcome. The database should be open now in next couple of months for external investigators. And then collaboration and networking, that's going to be the core of this talk today. And then share our Mayo Clinic story with how 5 for 4 sites kind of took a lead in this part. And then in the end, we'll go with a question and answer session. So this all started on one fine Sunday morning when a tweet came out from Boston University. Alan Walkie, Dr. Walkie is associate professor there in critical care medicine. He's a methodology expert. He knows how to design studies. He sent this tweet that, hey, this was a time that WHO was considering announcing as a pandemic at the time. If you remember, it happened sometime like on March 13th or March 18th timeline. I don't remember exactly. That would be great to have real time harmonized data for non-RCT randomized clinical trial questions. If anyone's working on something like that, if not anyone want to, my professor, mentor, Dr. Professor Gaich looked at it. He's a founding director of Discovery at CCM as well, and he just quickly replied within minutes like, hey, Rahul Kashyap is starting one, send him or me an email. He did. We end up exchanging our emails IDs, phone numbers in next couple of hours. We were on call in that evening, Boston time and my time. And then 3 weeks from that time, registry was already alive and kicking, and I'll show you our timeline as well. So big thanks to social media that people got connected. And I've never met Dr. Walkie before that. I think I haven't met him in person yet in 2 years because we're not traveling it, but he's a co-PI on this study, and then one of the methodology experts and helpful in some of the major publications. So what is virus registry or COVID-19 registry? It's a collaboration of international investigators like yourself in a field of critical care with coordinated efforts managed by Mayo Clinic and Society of Critical Care Medicine. Society of Critical Care Medicine is one of the largest society of critical care providers, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists, researchers, and scientists who work in intensive care medicine, a little bit of emergency medicine, anesthesia, pulmonary, sleep as well. It is a cross-sectional observational study, which included all eligible COVID-19 positive patients who were admitted to the hospitals in ICU or on the floor, and at participating sites. All sites were voluntary sites as well. And I'll show you some graph and figures to see. It was registered. We had an IRB to start with. There's no intervention. Complete de-identified data was collected. So, and we claim it to be one of the most accurate and generalizable near real-time data collection of COVID-19 last 2 years. Of course, we have lagged now, Omicron and all, but at least for first 1.5 years, that was true. The idea was to capture the practice variation, not only in America, but outside as well. And then we were able to do that with great success. It should give you, if you have not gone on the dashboard yet, it's simple ccmcovid19.org. It kind of gives you like roughly, we just touched 75,000 patients from 28 different countries and more than 300 sites who are voluntarily contributing data, either manually through automation, all are capturing data on RedCap common data platform. This is just the adult part of it. We have a pediatric version as well, which is coming from 12 countries, more than 2,500 patients now. Pediatric, anybody less than 18 years of age, and it's roughly 80 sites are contributing data, mostly from US for sure, but you would see, I think, Brazil, South America, Africa, Middle East, India, of course, and we have, I think, Japan and Far East as well, and some in Europe too. So variable success, but this becomes one of the largest databases outside the government agencies for that matter, and then several publications have come out. So sccmcovid19.org, you can save this, you can check it out. It's publicly available dashboard. It's a simplified data. By no means you can take any inference because data is not adjusted for comorbidities and other things as well. But this is something you can check out in your free time, which you can look into it. I'm showing a little bit old data, but kind of gives you an idea. Out of our registry, if you like, who sought help, male, female distribution of roughly half and half. What are the main race and ethnicities? Again, the registry is predominantly US. So you would see white Caucasian making the largest part of it, followed by African American, then Asian American, South Asian, West Asian, because there were few sites from that. So this is, take it as a grain of salt. It only represents your biased results, only patients who are included in the registry. Hispanic, non-Hispanic, but our symptoms, which is pretty common, like you would see roughly 2/3, 60% people within the registry showed up with dyspnea, shortness of breath, followed by fever, dry cough, myalgia, and diarrhea was like far number 5. But those 4 symptoms have stayed throughout the registry, almost same one. Then second bucket on this dashboard, you would see it, that how many patients require mechanical ventilation, 1/3. And again, we may have some sicker patients in the database, so there could be a selection bias. Then how many require non-invasive ventilation, high flow nasal cannula, and the numbers start going down. Like out of 70,000 at the time, it was even, I think, 60 or less thousand. This is coming out from 11,000 fill data. Out of them, how many of them were on mechanical ventilation, and so on and so forth. ECMO makes it like roughly more than 200 patients on ECMO with COVID-19 in different size. And then it kind of gives you an idea that roughly what was the, at the time, like we have roughly 8 to 9 days median, with the range of 5 to 70 days, 70 days spent on mechanical ventilation if somebody was on mechanical ventilation. Roughly ICU length of stay, hospital length of stay like 7-8 days, not too much difference. But again, these are small numbers. Out of 75,000 patients, the numbers are at the time was 5,000 or 12,000 in that regard. Discharge status, see 80% of the patients were discharged alive, roughly 20% hospital mortality, which kind of capture a wide variety, patients from Africa, Asia, and America and Southern America. Kind of give you a rough idea, like 1 in 5 died in the hospital. So that's a pretty high number. And then if you look into how many patients went home and home with healthcare facility and things like that. So give you a rough idea. Don't hold accountable these numbers, because these number changes every week or updates every week. This is a little bit older data, but kind of give you an idea on the dashboard at what you can see as a layman person. And same thing for pediatric and other things as well. Just to go over now, the whole purpose was, can we harmonize the data and start publishing it, letting out the world know what is happening, and people can adapt it. So we end up initially just introducing the registry. You see Dr. Walkie, my co-PI, Dr. Kumar, and us, we end up publishing very quickly the introduction of registry in critical care exploration, which is Society of Critical Care Medicine journal. Then we end up providing guiding principles. So if somebody else is looking to conduct or design some of these things during this pandemic or any future pandemics, how to conduct these observational critical care research studies for that purpose. So we end up writing, Dr. Walkie was another co-author on that part. Then our major paper came out sometime in December 2020 and January last year, where we looked at the outcome of these patients, and we found out that there is a huge variation in outcome, mortality from 10% to 80% in some sites. Of course, we protected sites identity by not revealing any names. We are not allowed by the IRBN rules, but that was an eye-opener, that in spite of adjusting for anything else, which hospital you go to could determine your mortality if you are from with COVID-19 and requiring mechanical ventilation and so on and so forth. So check it out. We tweeted it out quite a bit as well, and I share those information too. But let me share you our journey. Is that this? If you see this figure, I guess you can see this. One second. If you see this figure, you should be able to see that how from March 11th, right before the pandemic was announced by WHO, till March 31st in year 2020, we were able to not only create the idea, develop the protocol, have the social media contacts, teams forming, revision of it, submitting an IRB, setting up some social media accounts, submitting the hashtag, your frequently asked questions, standard operating procedure SOP, IRB approval, first draft of all these things, website was set up, and in fact, it was launched in first 16 sites and got IRB approved within 3 weeks time and enrolled our first 10 patients. So that kind of tells you that if things could be done in rapid pace, and some of this work was predated, like I was working on a couple of national projects to actually launch something similar. We just have to pivot it quickly and then launch it. So we were the second registry launch of that type right after WHO's ISRIC database, which we built up our database on as well. So check it out. This is all in public domain, and I'll be happy to share those ideas, those figures as well. We gave up the guiding principles as well, talking about what does the flow look like from, say, design to data collection and analysis, manuscript dissemination, data entry pieces, and so on and so forth. We even gave away the buckets of data needs to be collected in major buckets of demographic, clinical patient profile, ICU and hospital-related outcomes, and things like that. So it's a recipe for anybody to take it in any country, refine to their own needs, and actually launch it for any acute care illness for that matter during peacetime or at the time of pandemic. This is the publication I was talking about where we looked into different organ support. And it's a busy slide, my apologies, but idea is it got a fair share of media in that time. I think in late 2020, early 2021, where New York Times picked up on this part, and then it was very highly cited and publicized during the National Critical Care Meeting, CCC 50. But this was our infographic where you would see that patients who were requiring, out of 20,000 good data from the registry at the time, who were not on any organ support, the mortality death was only 8%. The median length of stay was roughly 6 days in hospital, and then 3/4 of them, they got discharged to home. So those who are looking for some data, this is published, well published. It came from our publication in Critical Care Medicine. If the patients who are requiring one organ support, mechanical ventilation, mortality jumped to 40%, from 8 to 40%. They spent roughly 2.5 times more, like roughly 2 weeks in hospital, and only 1/3, less than 1/3 went home. Everybody else either died or went to other places. If patients in this registry, within 20,000 patients, if you require 2 organ supports, mechanical ventilation and vasopressors, then your mortality was roughly half. Only 1 every 2 patients died in hospital. The length of stay was more than 2 weeks, 17, 18 days, and the number of people going home was only 22%. And remember, the people did not die, did not go home. They went to other places, nursing homes and assisted living facilities and things like that. The patients who had 3 organ support, mechanical ventilation, vasopressors, and renal replacement therapy, the mortality was roughly 3/4. And I was getting some comments from gentlemen before us from Bangladesh, doctor from Bangladesh. It tells you that, if you are requiring these 3 supports, regardless of age, you will die 3 times, 3 out of 4 times in hospital. But you're right, sicker, older patients were more likely to require. That's why you'll see the mortality high in that age group. But we have enough data that if age is a factor, but young people with organ supports also died. So it's kind of debatable. We will not know the full picture until next few years, and probably we can discuss those things, that mortality was higher in older age group versus younger age group, or vice versa. They require roughly 3 weeks of time if you are on 3 different organ support, and then only like handful of people went home otherwise. Then this was talking about it. Once we risk-adjusted hospital mortality range varied from roughly from 40% to 71%, and that was independent risk factors for mortality with median odds ratio of 1.69. So this is our infographic. Check it out, and we can send it to you, the link, when we tweeted about it. It was almost a year ago now, or more than a year ago now. I want to take you on a journey on the data collection process. And this is in full transparency. This is our red cap look like, where we have core data collection of core data 1, 2, and 3. inclusion testing, trial locations, demographics, symptoms, pre-med, and we have added now vaccination and all those things too, microbiology data, daily imaging data, and then you go into process of care, web bundle, fluid vasopressors, and outcomes. We put it 28 days, but it could be done anytime. So some of these are core data points, and we have enhanced data points, some organ support system of SOFA and PLOT for pediatric, Apache 2, Echo, and we have imaging data and PRISM for pediatric, and we collected some data for FEMA, for co-venting patients, and so on and so forth. So it's an extensive work to design and implement it, and also collecting data. We do not claim to have data from every single day. Mostly we ask sites to do day 0, day 1, 2, and 3, and day 28, and anything else for special event. If patient got intubated on day 8, we wanted intubation data. Patient got renal replacement therapy on day 11th, we wanted those kind of data. But data is patchy, and you all who have worked in this area, you know that complete data is a myth, but we were able to successfully get increased number of data every week as completion, saying we want to focus on core data 1, 2, and 3, and core data 7 first, and then start going and backfilling some of these Apache and SOFA data and vitals labs and processes as well. We'll be happy to talk and answer questions. If you are looking to do something like that, or you have idea of a global infrastructure to prepare it, we'll be happy to share our infrastructure with you. Then we decided to have a minimal data set. L is missing from there, but your basic demographic, age, race, sex, ethnicity, why they came to hospital, signs, symptoms, day 1, SOFA, Apache 2, so kind of which is a backbone of any publication coming out. And we decided to see, like, if you fill this data, your patient is completed, and then you can move on to the next patient if you are limited resources, especially in Africa, South Asia, South America, and so on and so forth. In that regard, remember, people were contributing data voluntarily, and many of you might have done it for other registry, or I'm sure for WHO ISRIG one as well, or maybe to this registry, not to my knowledge. And my thanks to you for doing for this registry, or anything else you contributed at the time of need, and that helped move the needle a little bit in knowing more about the virus, especially within hospital, what was happening with these patients. It may be a little bit boring for you, but this is our data automation part of it, using some of the SQL queries, workbench process from Epic, manual abstraction, putting it to data warehouse, going through the validation process, and finally bringing it to the registry by transforming some local registry upload and all those things. This is the project I'm working on right now with FDA to actually launch a national infrastructure, and probably a global infrastructure for these times where we can actually collect the data on rapid pace, as well as we can create some platform trials, test some of these new medications or novel medications or repurposed medications, and then hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and things like that. So that is a big lesson learned for us, that if we have some of these platforms, we can quickly test these things out, and then we can save many more lives just by avoiding the mistreatment of some of these medications. It's an old slide, but kind of gives you an idea that we made pretty rapid progress every week. It's like until last year, and you see that then it kind of became static, and now we are 75,000 patients as well. So kind of give you, and we send a newsletter every week, every other week. Kudos to the higher sites and things like that. So we have done all those things in that regard. Data quality was big on us, and we created some of these data reports. So we were sending it to sites as well, working with them one-on-one, making sure that their data is counted, and then they could be provided co-authorship in the publication. I'll share with you that how we developed the reward system for our investigators, and that was our first reward we built in. So we asked this question: what is in it for me as an investigator from in Bangladesh or India or Brazil or Japan or China or Russia? That what is in it for me? So we said, hey, anytime you're contributing data, a complete data set for a patient, and we had more than 500 variables. We said, if you just even have the minimal variable, I showed it to you, 30 or some of them, if your site's data is utilized in any publication, you will get a collaborative co-authorship, or anybody at your site who help you collect the data, 4, 5, 6 people would be added. We just published a paper where we have 800 collaborative co-authors. The pooled analysis was done. We never revealed any hospital. We did not compare hospital to this hospital or this country to that country. That was never part of our goal, and we kept it to that way. Second reward for them was that they can submit an idea for an ancillary study, and they can actually, we provide the template, we provide the research mentoring. They got the data for those ancillary studies, and then they could publish them as a first author. Of course, they have to give authorship to other sites as they were given as well, and then core team. But that was one of the main successes, and we are like roughly 30 manuscripts in pipeline, 15 something published, another 20 or so in pipeline, and each manuscript has a separate first author because that's their idea. We provide them the resources, or at least gave them the raw data. They churned it, they analyzed it, and wrote it down as well. And ultimately, whatever data they contributed from their side, they own that data. So they could download it anytime. We download it for them, gave it to them. They're free to do anything with that data. Publish, they don't need to tell us anything. This is their data. They own it, their site data. It's actually patient data, but their site data. They could publish anytime, present it at any local, national, regional meeting, and then they were given access to a dashboard, which is not publicly faced, so they can actually manipulate to see what research question they can ask. So we created some of these rewards, and then later on some funding came in, and we were able to provide some funding to site outside USA for manual data collection, and within USA for data automation through some of our collaborations I mentioned earlier. I will not go into much detail of ancillary study proposals, but that will be applicable to any of you who are looking to contribute or who are looking to seek this data out. Then we will open it up by the end of this year for non-contributing investigators to seek out data and publish. You have to have a proposal, you have to have a sign the data user agreement and all those things. But data contribution would not be applicable anymore for you because we may not have enough new patients coming out for that matter. There are multiple manuscripts. I'll not bore you. I'd rather be interested in you asking questions, providing suggestions in the end. But there are some outcomes of hospitalized patient, which I already talked about. The hospital variations, looking into this is already accepted now. In critical care medicine, we looked at the non-invasive oxygen support, and that manuscript is coming out. We just interviewed the primary author few weeks ago. ARDS practice management, that is process in analysis at this point. Pediatric got all three manuscripts except the MISC, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, is not published yet, but other two are already published. The management of outcome and risk factor for severe disease and outcome as well. We had a separate pediatric lead, and they did a really, really good job. Kind of give you an idea of, like, we had 3 rounds of ancillary study proposals submitted, 2 pages or short. First round, we received like 64, second round, roughly 67, third round, 35. And we have approved like more than 60 of these now. And I said roughly 30 in pipeline, 15 published, and another 21 are in either writing or submission stages as well. That's a huge success that, having people own that data and publishing them as a first author. I think I'm really proud of that experiment, and it worked out really, really well. Collaboration is big, as I mentioned to you guys, and I seek out in today's meeting as well, and I'll be happy to provide resources or any inputs around it. Not only just with the Mayo Clinic and Society of Clinical Medicine, we were able to partner with the American College of Radiology. They became our imaging hub. So we have thousands of images, more than 10,000 images of chest X-rays, ultrasound, chest CT scan, echographic reports, images, and so on and so forth. We partner with Point Click Care, that is the largest data provider for nursing home patients. And then that kind of gave us like roughly 100,000 patient data on that. There's a paper is in writing right now. We had an abstract accepted at Society of Clinical Medicine as well, laying out what was the mortality among the patients who were in nursing home and so on and so forth. Our collaboration with ISRIC, as we mentioned about it, we are working on a combined manuscript with them, asking a question which could not be answered with each of our databases. Our collaboration with FDA, Cure ID, has been the most successful, and they are launching few of these pro bono projects to capture data on some of these rare diseases, but that is actually letting us work towards creating a platform trial where in future, in next year or next year, we can continue to test for some of the bread and butter diseases in ICU, but in future, we can actually flip the switch and then use it at the time of pandemic, which is going to happen in our lifetime. I hope it has not been in the last 10 years, but the way things are, I'm sure we're going to see another pandemic in next than 10 years. Then some collaboration is still in process with American Heart Association, Infectious Disease Society of America, as well as our OBGYN Society, SOAP, in that regard. So a lot of collaboration, not all got to the same slide, but I'll be happy to talk further if you're interested in those areas. You may ask that you publish, there's a whole variation in the hospitals, what you're doing to fix it. And that led us to our next project, which was CDC funded in a part for Society of Critical Care Medicine. We call it Stop Virus, structured team-based optimal supportive care for virus study patients. Stop Virus Collab is our hashtag for our Twitter and other social media activities. So what we did is we brought together the best practices hospital and then ask them to share their practice and management to anybody who could be on those calls, our virus site or outside virus site as well. And that made difference. People were able to talk how they manage their patients and they get a higher, better outcomes, and people could ask questions and listen to that as well. So this was a pretty good, we had it for like 6 or 7 months, and those things are recorded already. And I think they are freely available on SCCM's site for anybody to check it out. Those sessions were recorded where best practices were shared at the time. And we are very proud of this efforts called Stop Virus as well. And that would just come out because of what we could learn from harmonized data from all these sites. You might have seen different team structures, distributed, centralized, decentralized. We kind of have a decentralized and distributed pattern in this one. Of course, me being a PI, I had an amazing team. We worked with Dr. Kumar from Society of Critical Care Medicine, Dr. Walkie from Boston University, and then we have leads for each project manager, specialty subgroup, data automation, data cutting center, and each bubble tells you the name of the people who are responsible for that, or at least different sites. And of course, mentoring is a big part of it, and we had 2 great mentors, past SCCM, just outgoing SCCM president, Dr. Greg Martin, and of course, my own mentor, Professor Ogi Gaich, who has been instrumental for this whole registry and any of the work we've done before that. I don't want to bore you. I think time-wise, we are roughly at 30 minutes mark. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes and probably stop after that. It's a huge success story for Mayo Clinic as well. Mayo Clinic based in Rochester, Minnesota, and then 2 major sites in Arizona and Florida, but we have some health system site as well. It was so pleasing to see that I could share some of those pictures with you. Mr. Saurabh, Mr. Agarwal, is it okay if I take another 5 minutes, or are we good on time?
Absolutely, no problem. You can extend. That's fine. You can even take longer if you want.
Absolutely, and we have some questions too, so I'll take those questions then.
Yeah, we have time for that. We can always extend the session for 30 minutes. That's fine.
Absolutely. You would see some of the pictures because you might have seen some of these names as well. Dr. Gaich, Dr. Lal, Dr. Call them JP Dominic Garces, one of the physician and fellows. But you would see our postdoctoral research, Dr. Bansal is project manager. Neha is a medical student. She was a second-year medical student and started helping out with the registry, especially onboarding the site as well. And she's just got accepted for dermatology publication from Virus Registry. Then, of course, myself, Dr. Kumar from SCCM, and Dr. Walkie. So kind of making the core team from the day one, or at least the first few months, started working together. And many of us, we haven't met in person yet. But this is the power of social media. It's the power of Zoom. Thanks to Mr. Agarwal for using it, and that we have been using for many years now, even before COVID-19. Pediatric leads, you would see Dr. Garcia, Dr. Levy, and Dr. Tekin was research fellow, one of the largest database of pediatric database of COVID-19 outside government institution. These were the architect of the core of pediatric registry done at Rochester, Minnesota. Then our Mankato site, we have large group. Dr. Khan is a lead. She is the chair of the critical care medicine there at Mankato as well. Dr. Koritala, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Kanduri, Dr. Jan, and of course, Dr. Domik was based there as well. And then now the team has grown where there are a few more postdocs as well. Just to introduce, and maybe if you may know some of these names for that regard. There are tons of publication ancillary studies submitted from these sites as well. Many of them are already approved and maybe in writing at this point as well. Just to give you an idea, looking at inhaled corticosteroid, pre-hospital use, and then outcome part of it. Looking at immunotherapy and patient's outcome as well. Looking at systematic glucocorticoid. So you would see that any past history of inhaled corticosteroid, use of immunotherapy, and systematic glucocorticoid steroids in hospital. These all questions could be answered not just because you can have data in one hospital. Now we're talking about 300 hospitals, solid data of 20, 25, 30,000 patients, which is complete as well. And these questions could be answered. That is the power of the registry. Then looking into co-infections or secondary co-infection as well. And then capturing if the patients would have the COVID-19 and so on and so forth. Our Jacksonville, Florida colleagues, a phenomenal team led by Dr. Sanghavi, who's the vice chair of practice there, phenomenal research fellows at the time, Dr. Giri, Dr. Yarapu, and Dr. Kaur. They have matched in residencies now, so some of them are not there with us. They are already getting trained, but the power of young physicians, research coordinators, nursing colleagues, pharmacy colleagues has been a backbone of success of this registry. And then tons of ideas from them, use of nitric oxide, looking at utilization of procalcitonin in these patients, and so on and so forth. So you can see that any and all things which are clinically meaningful could be answered through the registry, which is under review and publication at this point. Our team from Arizona, led by Dr. Katin Siba, good friend of mine, Dr. Sen, and then medical students, internal medicine resident, research coordinator, data coordinator. So it can tell you that there's so many people at each site volunteer their time to contribute the data, and I'll share some of the numbers in the end with you, say how pleasing and heartwarming this story is. And of course, our own site in Rochester, which, you know, if any of you have been here, you would see that our back door, which shows the majestic Gonda and Mayo building for that matter. Myself, Dr. Abigail Lanao from Eau Claire side, and our team of postdoctoral research fellows. Out of them, Dr. Sharma, Dr. Bogevich, Dr. Singh have already matched into residencies. They are doing their intermedicine neurology residency. Sharez is a pre-med. He's matched into medical school. He was a phenomenal person, still working with us. Dr. Jach is matching in this year as well, and Barbara was other medical student. So this is just some of the highlight of the work being done, the diversity of the teams, the leads and co-leads kind of give you that these things could not be done in a silo. And then maybe I may be the representation today for the registry, but there are tons and tons of people have worked hard to make it happen to this point. I'll not bore you with some of the data automation process, but if you are interested or have resources or have Epic or a Cerner or any other data electronic medical record, we use Epic Workbench process, automated variables, which we automated is with the age, sex, weight, height, and so on and so forth, and CoreData 7, and utilizing Microsoft SQL queries, which I don't know how to do it, but we have amazing data analysts who could do that, and some of the automation data. But majority of data which came in early for first 6 to 9 months, it was all done manually. So I don't want to discount the work, and still many sites are contributing data manually, and that is, I think, it's going to be staying that way until we completely switch to automation, and that is not going to happen in at least next couple of years. My apologies for a very busy slide, but just wanted to show you some of the study proposals submitted from our site as well, which got approved or under review and things like that. And many of them are in publication looking at altitude, seasonal and latitude variation, hypothyroidism, dermatological manifestation. Neha's paper got accepted, prone positioning, thyroid function got accepted, outcome differences in symptomatic and symptomatic. So you can do all and ask these questions if you have a large data set, and then we are working towards in that regard. These are some of the results for altitude latitude study. You would see that we were able to do some fancy graphs of looking at different latitude and altitude and saying there's an association between different symptoms. There's some association coming out. This paper is pending, so please don't take pictures or anything like that for this particular site, but it should be accepted soon in World Journal of Clinical Medicine. Our IRB process, we are in process of submitting how much time it takes for IRB submission to IRB approval to REDCap data access and first patient entry. And this is the report we are doing it, writing it to give an idea for people, so how much time it takes in that regard. I think I'll stop here to give you a summary that this is a story, it's a global story. It's a story of people's selflessness at the time of need. Everybody wanted to do something, saying, how could we contribute? And then many people contributed saying, you know what, I can share some data, de-identify data after appropriate approvals, and that's a start. So at the time, or a few months ago, it was 66,000. Now we are sitting at 75,000 patient data, more than like 140,000 patient days data. We have it more than 13 million data points as of today. It's a story of more than 3,000 volunteers in 300 hospitals or more, 40 US states, 28 countries now. As I said, we have more than 150 ancestry ideas submitted, 45s are approved. At this point, instead of 4 manuscripts, we have like 16 published and another 21 in submission process. So this slide kind of captures, or in part, the magnitude of the change, the hard work being done by so many good people, doctors, nurses, resident, pharmacists, respiratory therapists, research fellows, research coordinators, data analysts, and countless other people. So I'll leave you with this, that this SCCM Discovery's virus COVID-19 registry sets an example of a rapidly deployed and international pandemic registry which seeks to provide near real-time analytics and information of intensive care treatment and outcomes of COVID-19 patient. Join us, send us feedback. I'll be very, very open for questions, suggestions, and something is not clear. And if you have some project going on similar to that or anything new, I'll be happy to join or contribute if time permits. So I'll leave you with that. This is you can type in SCCM Discovery virus. You should get to the homepage of this. At COVID-19 registry is our hashtag, our handle. My handle is given there, dr_sr cashup. And then that's my email ID. If you have any questions, that's cashup.rahul@mayo.edu. I'm going to stop here. It's roughly 40 minutes. As I said, 30 to 40 minutes. And then probably give it a minute, and then probably we can go into chat section to answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap. It was a very well finished presentation, well on time. And thank you everyone for joining in. Now we will keep the floor open for the question answers. I request everyone to kindly raise your hands and we will unmute and ask questions. And also other guests who are not from National Medical Association can write your questions on the forum, on the chat box, and we will take your questions. Dr. Angelica, please go ahead. She's from South Africa.
Thank you so much for Rahul for a very interesting presentation. Rahul, I'd just like to ask you, I noticed this is now for critical care in a hospital, but I also think there's a need for, as a general practitioners at primary healthcare level, to collect the data of what we are seeing and how we treat our patients, and what the outcomes were, are of these patients. I'm not sure. I think it seems that one can join you on that, but or is this only for hospital and not really anything at primary healthcare pre-admission, and how we handle the patients at that level and treat the patients at that level? Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very important question. I think it's not early. In fact, if my predictions are right, the pandemic is heading towards your way in primary care, especially with post-acute sequelae of COVID-19, and then some of the lingering effects coming out, especially PTSD, depression, and then chronic disease management, which was neglected. So you are right on target. The pandemic is moving or will move, at least the burden of the disease would move from acute care, intensive care, emergency room to now to primary care in the next several years for reasons I just mentioned. So, and there are some talks, there's some groups already working on these areas, but it's not too late to start something with the data collection of your own, or if you need help, we'll be happy to partner or at least provide some resources or provide some guidance around it. You know your patients better, so you are content expertise. I can provide some methodology expertise or some resources to capture that data, which will definitely help you enhance your practice, because as these patients start coming in, mild symptoms, but 3 months later, they're coming up now with fatigue all the time, 9 months, 8 months, and then chronic disease, nothing to do with COVID-19, but it got delayed. So that pandemic is coming our way. I think we publish a paper outside the COVID-19 registry to talk about it. So very, very timely question.
Dr. Bukhari? You're unmute. You have to unmute.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Saurabh and Dr. Hall. It was really very nice presentation about the registry of the COVID. Now, almost there are more than 2 years of this pandemic, but 2 questions are still in our mind. Why the death was high in developed countries, Europe, America, as compared to the developing or underdeveloped countries. One, why the transmission was very high, even having a lot of facilities. If I compare Pakistan, so why this transmission was high in those countries as compared to developing and developed countries? Can you explain me these two basic questions still are in our brain?
Let me not give you an answer, and then this is a humbling experience. This is an amazing group of eminent providers and doctors, and I don't think so that I'm in a situation to answer this question. I can express my opinion about it though.
Yes.
It's a multifactorial. It's easy. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Bukhari. Shukriya for asking that question. It's easy for us to point fingers, and as a physician scientist, I like to see myself in like what could have been done better. So let me start there, and it's going to be a little bit longer answer for maybe non-answer, but longer explanation. So I took it on myself or our group when we failed to respond to Ebola in 2013 and 14. Thankfully, it was not that bad, like 8 or 10 patients in US. Of course, Africa was affected quite a bit. And then since then, I started working on this data harmonization. Like, you know what, if as a country or as a 30, 40, 50, 60 physician scientist or nurse scientist or PhD scientist, if we can't agree what data points we'll be collecting and what's their definition, we're gonna do the same mistakes what we did during the Ebola. And then when this pandemic came in, I was not ready. I was ready to launch a C2D2 called Critical Care Data Dictionary implementation project for sepsis. And my professor told me, like, you know what? I told him, oh my gosh, we missed the opportunity. And he said, no, you did not. Just pivot, just repurpose it. So it took me several weeks. My hand was swollen to refine my proposal and then submit it and all. Now coming back to your point is, so that was my contribution. What could I do to help out? But coming back to your question is that they're multifactorial. We know that things happen in Wuhan, then in New York and Lombardy in Italy. My impression and my personal bias is the system got overwhelmed too quickly, too fast, regardless of where you were, and that kind of opened up the cracks in the system. So older people with comorbidities and all, they end up dying because we did not know how it's going to behave, what are the organs going to affect, and things like that. One question coming in chat box was, okay, so what things work? What do you know? One thing we know is that there is a huge variation in mortality from hospital to hospital. Without comparing countries, without comparing anything else, after adjusting for patients' comorbidities and age and SOFA and all those things, still there are unexplainable differences in practice variations in hospital. Two, which is common across our stop virus collaborations, talks and all, early supportive treatment and adherence to the best practice guidelines was the most effective treatment. Forget anything else for that matter. That was found to be the most effective treatment. Of course, remdesivir came later on. Of course, other things came out. Early fluid cessation, early sepsis, steroid if required, to early invasive or non-invasive mechanical ventilation. Those are published. It's not my opinion. Those are published data saying that, you know what, the people who needed support and they were given non-invasive before invasive, they did really well. People who got fluid resuscitation, early antibiotic for second infection, they did really well. So in nutshell, early adaptation to best practices was the best antidote, and it still is until the vaccine came in. But that is just my opinion and a little bit of contribution to your question.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul. Thank you.
Dr. Jamal.
Thank you, Saurabh. I must thank Dr. Rahul. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahul. Actually, my question is because you are dealing with the registry, and in UK, they are just giving the number of deaths up to 28 days post-COVID. They are counting up to for 28 days. My question is that in that case, it will not be correct data because the other countries of the world, they are not counting that. I don't know what about the US. So what it should be reasonable that the WHO should take the initiative that after how many days you have to connect, you have to count, because they are telling that it's within 28 days if anyone dies after contracting COVID, it is due to COVID. But it's not. It's the same things are not followed in the other countries. So it will be a mistake rather. But I see in case of registry. Number two, my question is. Initially, I used to know. Today, actually, rather I can say I must thank you that you have shown this data. That white Caucasian is more we are getting this year in ICU and other 60%, and black or Hispanic is just around 24%. Previously, I was knowing it's more in the black or Hispanic, and they are dying more, and also the Asians also. But the data says a different thing now. So this is I don't know how we will explain now. Initially, it was there, I think. And lastly, if you can help me this year, because the WHO chief was telling that if the scope for genome sequencing in the countries are not improved, then we will not get the opportunity to tackle the incoming new variant, because this is most expensive, and the WHO must, when they are telling it, they must also mitigate it, because it is costly for the poor countries. They cannot do it. But one new variant may emerge, which according to the one scientist, they are just expecting that a new virus is coming up, which will be like Mars in terms of death, and spreading like Omicron. So that also has to be addressed actually. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Jamal, as well. Shukriya for asking question. So one thing I will answer the question and provide a clarification that the data which I've shown you on the dashboard, it's full of selection bias for two reasons. The majority of data is coming out from US. So then you would see a disproportionately higher number of patients who are the Caucasian African American. That doesn't mean that's only people getting affected. Two, data is likely that the academic medical center may have more resources to contribute data. That might be another selection bias of these patients as well. So I will not read too much into it. The percentages there. We have some papers published after adjusting for these things, looking at the healthcare disparities. So this is it's a misrepresentation because they are full of selection biases and investigative biases, that patients' data who are sick enough, they might get into database first and faster and things like that. Now, I am too junior or too inexperienced or too naive to comment on the policies from WHO or other countries and then some of the sequencing part of it in that regard. So I'll pass on that answer, those first and third question, and then probably we can seek some discussion in the end to see if other dignitaries on the call could provide some insights to them in the end. I should be in politics, right?
No, thank you. But I think WHO should come up to just harmonize these things. Actually, there should be a similar way of getting this, so that
so actually I have So actually I have an answer to your question. So you are actually highlighting the fundamental issue of clinical research during pandemic time is that let's say if UK is taking a rule of 28 days, US is not, Africa is not. That kind of highlights that there is no consistency of data variables operational definition. So outcome or mortality of COVID-19 is what it is. Somebody's saying I'm going to count until 28 days. Somebody's saying in the hospital or 30 days or 90 days. So this is a problem. This is just one data point. We can go with history of a steroid. We can go with gender. We can go with pneumonia definition or asthma. So this is a problem which we have not solved it yet. So this is it's an actual problem to see how can we harmonize the data definitions, and that is something I think world has to come together.
Dr. Monica, your question, please.
I just have two comments. One was thank you for a fantastic presentation and for the introduction to data science in a time when you were able to collect very fortuitously from a tweet a great start. And I do believe that you're launching the careers and the thought process of many people with your database. So it's incredible to see how you are building such positive things from a time of adversity. It's commendable. We are very interested in find out what your findings are, even though we know that the data can be skewed by those who are reporting. And anytime using a voluntary reporting system can be affected. But you did mention one of the things about your major findings, and that was that the mortality rate differed based on the hospitals that you were in. My first question is what other major findings have you found that you found surprising at the time that you found it? And we know that this is a moving pandemic, and so it may not apply to today. And the second is that it's something that I just messaged you, and I just wanted to speak about in response to prior questions about the difference in mortality rates across the world. I work as an allergist and clinical immunologist, and what I see is that my patients have access to medications, whether it be for eosinophilic asthma, whether it be for immunodeficiencies, that we have access to medications that are not ubiquitously available across the world. These medications are immune modifying, immune modulating, and we're able to keep a sicker population treated at home. So it is possible that our patients who got COVID, and the reason why we have a higher mortality rate, more than just reporting and testing, might be the fact that we have a sicker, older population that was susceptible to this infection, or the areas that were infected, we did not know enough at that time. So that's why that may have contributed as part of the multiple factors leading to the mortality rate. So again, the question again was for you, what were your major findings?
So I kind of lost track of major findings. As I said, like we have roughly 130 some ideas submitted, some 20 from my own team itself. But I would highlight a couple of things. First thing, which came across, that practice variation that was mind-boggling for us. We did not think it will be that different, but we had data to show it, and that got some media attention too. Our recently published paper in JAMA in December, right before Christmas, led by Dr. Joshua Denson, one of the findings coming out that people who have metabolic syndrome, definition, obesity, and other parts, and if they were more likely to get ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, everything else being the same. That was, we knew, and that could be, and I think we have argued in that part, maybe the nations who have higher incidence of obesity and metabolic syndrome, given that they will get a deadly disease called ARDS, and then on top of that, organ failure and other things might explain in part a little bit higher mortality. It's open for interpretation, but that is one of our latest finding in December 2021, 2 months ago in JAMA Open Network. We are looking at more of, as I said, in 3 buckets of chronic conditions and pre-hospital medications. Is any of these medications helpful? One of my abstract from H1N1 pandemic time, which looks at to the people who are asthma patients, they were a little bit protective for H1N1 infection. It's coming out from only few hundred patient data from one institution at the time. So we thought that it could be because maybe they're taking steroids, and that might be protecting them. That is not causing them get a greater infection and inflammation. It's open for interpretation. So our focus is in buckets of either pre-medications, buckets of chronic medical condition. If they are more, that's why we're looking for hypothyroidism. Either it is protective or more, or are people getting these immunological things after the fact? They had no issues with thyroid first, but now you see certain number of percentage of things coming out. Third bucket is the process of care. What happened with them in the hospital? Requirement of antibiotics, steroids, different medications, comparative effectiveness of these. People got a lot of experimental medications. You will not believe. We have database patients who got hydroxychloroquine in our database. Now thinking back, like, oh my gosh, how could it happen? But yes, early part, we have those things as well. And everything under the sun, from vitamin D to vitamin C, and then any vitamin you can count off it. And third is our mortality. Is there risk factors, independent risk factors, which can predict mortality, everything else being the same? Now, we did not get into that part, but I think my personal passion is to create a patient-based registry where they can actually report their symptoms of PASC, post-acute sequelae of COVID-19 as well. The website has, if you go to the website, in the bottom, there's a publication link. If you click on it, it takes you to the NIH website where we have published papers there as well. I'll be happy to provide a summary later on, but I think initial 12 papers which are already there, and certain other in pipeline as well. And then I agree with your comment, the immunomodulation, I think we don't know enough about it. If anybody's, and Mr. Agarwal, feel free to quote me on that or in that regard. If anybody's claiming to know that we know everything about this virus or this pandemic, I think they're lying or they're just being ignorant. we will not know about what happened to us in these 3 years, at least after 2025 or 2026, because by the time data will be clean, experts like yourself, people will sit down, they look at it, they will see a pattern. As a researcher, we just do a pattern recognition. We're not inventing any new thing. So I think by 2025, 2026, we will know exactly happen. And I'm sure some of your theories would be proven. I personally believe that they will be proven right.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm giving long answers. I should shut out a little bit.
Fine. The answers are required. Dr. Sajjad from Pakistan again.
Okay, thank you very much, Saurabh. A very excellent presentation by Dr. Rahul. Zabardast maza aa gaya aapki presentation se. And my I have two questions. Number one is, do you have any data or statistics about the loss of smell and loss of taste in this COVID-19 patients at your side? And secondly, my question is that why in Europe of America, after having a much percentage, I think 80 to 90% people are vaccinated, even then they are being infected very rapidly, or this virus is transmitting very rapidly as compared to Eastern countries like Pakistan. In Pakistan, we have very less amount of vaccinated people, but the transmission of vaccines, transmission of virus is not so much as compared to the Western countries. So thank you very much, these two questions. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Sajjad. Shukriya for your comment. Thank you so much. So one question is, I think loss of smell and loss of taste was, I think, number top sixth or seventh syndrome, which was reported by the patients who are in our registry. Now, it doesn't mean that is not maybe true. So remember, this registry only captured the patients who got sick enough to come to hospital or in ICU. A large number of patients never came to hospital, even diagnosed, and then that percentage might have loss of smell, loss of taste, and might skew the data differently. But in hospitalized patient, it was not in top 5 symptoms, because if they're coming with difficulty of breathing, they're coming with fever and myalgia and things like that. So our registry, because of the nature of the design, it gives you the sick patients, and that is not our top 5 criteria, 6th or 7th. But I bet the patients who did not come to hospital might have that symptoms of top 1 or top 2 or top 3 in that regard. Second question is a little bit, I'll stay away from it, given that these are multifactorial. The underreporting, the overreporting, the crowding, the resources, the health system. There's so many factors which could have affected the infection rate in the beginning. And now we know there's enough data. I think I heard Dr. Vasudev saying is there's enough data from CDC, which I reviewed it last week. It's saying that the people who are vaccinated, they are 5 to 6 times less likely to get infected, and then even more less likely to go to hospital. So there's no doubt that vaccinated people are very less likely to get sick or very less likely to go to hospital. However, there are and there will always be some breakthrough infection if you're not careful enough, or your immunity is not well developed, or whatever reason for that matter. But the sickness, the mortality, and then post-acute sequelae in those patients are very minimal or low, and that data is coming out from almost all countries, and there's no doubt about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Rahul. Can you add about the vertigo during COVID? Do you have any data of vertigo or palpitation?
So yeah, this question was asked by.
I am an ENT surgeon in practicing in Karachi, Pakistan. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so this question was asked by a couple of reporters in last couple of years, and unfortunately, I don't have enough number of patients reporting with vertigo. However, I would challenge you, and if you are interested, I can work with you. I have some students, they can write a review article of already published cases with vertigo on COVID-19. My registry doesn't have enough cases at this point, but I'll be happy to work with you to write a review article on that. Not one of my students will be very interested in writing a review article.
Dr. Rahul, can I just add something? question of Dr. Kaisa Sajjan. The thing is that, when we consider the number of deaths, actually, this cannot be actually concealed. You are telling the over-reporting, under-reporting, it's okay. About the infections, number of infections, okay. If somebody comes to the comes and the notice, it's noticed. But when it's the case of death, it's not here. So we know the proportion, actually, proportion of death and the infection, number of infections. So it is almost it's known to everybody. So when we consider the number of deaths in these countries, that is actually to be actually mentioned, actually, and to be noticed.
Could
It's
be
less,
true,
it's
and
much less.
I would agree with you in a part, saying that from my registry standpoint, we included patients who had COVID-19 positive, and that's a reason they came to hospital. A patient coming with trauma and having COVID-19 positive, we did not include them in our analysis. We didn't count them. We only included that your admission is because COVID-19. And if you died in the hospital, we were able to capture it, and then some places afterwards as well. So because we are publishing data on ICU patients for many years now, at least we perfected that kind of system, and then try to keep it as kosher, as clean, or as pak as possible in Urdu or Bengali, if that makes sense.
Wrong. Yes,
Hi.
go ahead, Dr. Chong.
Dr. Kasha, sorry to trouble you, but I'm just wondering, is there any data in your, I know you're mainly collecting ICU data, but is there any data that shows that young people are disproportionately affected by Omicron? I mean, not in terms of just behavior, but in terms of biological factors. Is there any suggestion? Thank you.
Yeah, so I was a huge proponent to collect the variant in database as well before Delta time, but the core team's decision was because the practice and management is no different for somebody who's coming with Alpha, Delta, or Omicron was not there at the time when we had this discussion. And these things are very important for public health measures, but for providers and scientists who see patients in the hospital, for us, I don't think so it matters that what variant you're coming in, unless there is a peculiar features for that variant, and we need to be aware of it. So unfortunately, we don't have the variant data in the registry, but I have the same access to the papers coming out and the literature coming out that you guys do it as well. And so I would say that, Omicron data is so early right now. I've seen patients with Omicron and regular flu getting infected and things like that. But I'll be equally knowledgeable or in blind like you for age distribution. I know in pediatric, there is a bimodal distribution for AKI, acute kidney injury, that if you're too young, then you get too much and you're too old. And the middle portion of the population was protected. But again, these are multifactorial. We have to go through a couple of confounders and modifiers to make sure that we are confident in what we are saying it. So probably I may not have answered to your question, but it's a very important question.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions coming up?
If not, I think it's time to wrap this session up. And it was the most informative session, and it was very, very good for you to tell us that such a registry exists. I mean,
I think, Dr. Chong, we just have another question on the Facebook,
Okay.
which says, can you enlighten us about anything on the vaccination and the booster shots, which you are, talking about? You're mute. Yeah.
So sorry. So our registry, we didn't have the immunization status. Sorry, we had a pre-immunization status, but we didn't have the vaccine, because remember, we launched in March 2020. There was no vaccine. But as we were hearing about it, we were able to actually add those data points in real time. So it's kind of living registry as well. And then fortunately, we were able to, idea was you get a vaccine, you don't get the infection, you don't come to hospital. But I think there are at least few hundred breakthrough infection cases in our registry from across the world, and at least in 28 countries, predominantly from USA, made it to our registry, where They may have had the first vaccine. I think we have the highest one only after one vaccine, and then some after second vaccine. And the third vaccine was added just like 3 months ago. So we don't have enough data. But that, as I was saying it, these things take time. It's going to take us a little bit time to clean it up, have a question asked around it, analyze it, write it. So these things get delayed for at least 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and publication process is amazingly delayed. Those who have been in this business can tell you that how frustrating it is to not to be able to publish it sooner, even after peer review. So unfortunately, I don't have that data, but there's a CDC's MMR. They have this weekly report, which has actually looked and had on in one hospital in California, looking at hospitalization after one vaccine versus unvaccinated, and that is very clear that getting vaccine is this is the biggest life insurance you can get during the COVID-19 pandemic. I got all three of mine. So
thank you so much. I think we'll take the last question from Dr. Alvin. I just see his hands coming up at the last moment. Dr. Alvin.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Dr. Rahul. You have a very nice lecture, I believe. But I'm sorry that I had come in late. So I had asked if Saurabh, you got the recording, the videos, that we could have an opportunity to learn again. But from your Q&A just now, I had found that you had answered us very, very aptly and wisely. Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions. I'm from Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, well, unfortunately, is now in the Omicron wave, our belated wave. South Africa or anywhere else seemed to have already conquered the enemy and won the battle. And even in the USA, the numbers are now decreasing. But in Hong Kong, we are now rocketing, soaring up. We are now in the exponential phase of the fifth wave. And now thousands of patients are added to the hospitals and fully booked. So just wonder how we could go out of this turmoil. Well, I would just also like to ask you a question. Now, we are giving 2 vaccines to the public. One is the BioNTech, is an mRNA, and then a Chinese killed virus vaccine, the Sinovac or CoronaVac. So it's been well known that the antibody levels produced by the killed virus vaccine is not high enough, in fact. Comparatively, they said that the cellular immunity is even better by the CoronaVac better than the BioNTech. But I just wonder, from your experience or from the research world, is this really quantitatively comparable that or clinically that we could, many parents, I am a pediatrician, many parents are asking us which vaccine should they choose. So I know that perhaps in your country you don't have the killed virus vaccine, but from the scientific researchers. So do you think the cellular immunity response from the killed virus vaccine is very important as well for preventing the serious illnesses or hospitalizations from the Omicron pandemic? And another question is about the vitamin D that you had just mentioned. Are there new evidence that prove that vitamin D is really good for preventing or easing the symptoms of the coronavirus infection? So thank you very much.
Ni hao, Sheshe. Sorry to hear. I'm following the news as well in Hong Kong, and I'm really sorry that you guys are looking at this quick peak, and I hope that there is a quick decline like it has happened in other places as well. One thing is that vaccination is something which should be the focus at this point, and like going with the basic principles of avoiding the crowding, hand washing, masking, and all those things, which you guys are doing it phenomenally for 2 years now. Your direct question, I don't think so I'm qualified enough to answer it as an authority, but at this point, from public health perspective, as a physician scientist perspective, the focus would be that it doesn't matter what vaccine you're getting it. The point is, I would not spend any time in debating if it is 30% efficacious, is 50%, that's a 30% less chance of getting sick or dying, 50% less chance of getting sick or dying. So I would go ahead and get it, what is available, as quickly as possible within the limits and approval process of that. In our registry, we do have data, but remember, our registry only captures the data of patients who came to hospital with COVID-19. So most likely, if I'll be getting a data, would be breakthrough infections after first dose, breakthrough infections after first and second dose, and breakthrough infection after first, second, and third dose. So we have a research question around it, which we're looking into, saying if there is a difference in symptoms, severity, resource utilization, and organ failures as a dose response. If you're coming with only after one dose, then you should be more sick. 2 doses, little less sick, and so on and so forth. But vast majority of the patients with COVID-19 after infection are likely not to be in the hospital. That's the whole purpose of vaccination. So we will have a very specific group of breakthrough infection and sick enough to be in the hospital. That may not answer your question, but it may shed some light. But that data may not come out, the publication may not come out for another 3 to 4 months. See how beautifully I ignored your cellular immunity question with other mRNA question as well, because I don't know enough about it. And I've been a huge proponent of vaccination, regardless what is there, because that is the most important part. And especially at the impending Omicron surge in Hong Kong, I think that is the most important question we need to answer.
Thank you. What about the vitamin D? We had been advised that vitamin D is important.
Yeah. I would say this, I have not seen the convincing data to suggest that vitamin D or vitamin C has helped prevent the infection. I've looked at the literature, and we have few of the review articles and meta-analysis in process, but I don't think so the literature is convincing enough to say that zinc or vitamin D or vitamin C independently prevented infection or severity around it. So unless you show me something, I might not be able to change my opinion yet.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry that I have to continue. On Saturday morning, we are still fully occupied. Now giving vaccines to the public, treating the patients. So sorry, I have to leave early. Nice meeting you,
Dr. Alvin. Dr. Alvin, I have a question to you, Dr. Alvin. I have seen you 90% beds are occupied in Hong Kong, and 90%. Last night I have seen it. So they are all mostly vaccinated. Why these people, they're going to the hospital, or the number of beds are less there?
Oh, I'm sorry. In fact, Jamal, you had asked a very good question. I guess, firstly, overall vaccination coverage in Hong Kong is 80% for the first dose, but only 75% for the second dose. The immune response after the first dose is not adequate for preventing the infection. And thank you. And secondly, it's not equal for every different age group. That is, for over 80 years of age, the vaccination coverage rate is only 25%. I'm so sad about that, because many of the relatives of these elderly citizens refuse to consent for the vaccination for their elderly family members. because they are afraid of any side effects of the vaccines. So these unvaccinated elderly citizens are very vulnerable when there's the fifth wave of the Omicron surge. So you can see most of those serious patients waiting for admission into the hospital and the fatalities. 90% of them were unvaccinated or inadequately vaccinated elderly patients. And so I feel very sad about it. So now we are still urging the public to have vaccination for the elderly, but still it's very low. For children, we just started the vaccination for the 3 to 11 years age group. And for the 5 to 11 years old, we only had about less than 10% being vaccinated. And for the 3 to 5, only about 3% vaccinated. And this is, of course, reasonable because I think many parents, they had to think about vaccinations or the long-term side effects because of the the outbreak of myocarditis after the BioNTech vaccination for the teenagers last year. Many parents became hesitant. So thank you. Thank you for your question. I think that's our situation now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for answering because I didn't have the answer for that.
Okay.
Okay, Sarab, I think we've come to the end of our session. And thank you, Dr. Rahul Kashyap. It was such a brilliant session with you. And it's really, really quite heartening to see that the community has come together to form this registry and to contribute all the data, in such a tough time and such a trying time for all of us. And everybody is just pulled together and managed to pull all the data and learn from each other and learn from all the studies that will be coming out shortly. And, we much appreciate the effort. So thank you very much for spending time with us today. And it was really enlightening. And we all will look at your registry and see what we can gather from there and contribute.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap. It was very nice to have you on this forum.
Thanks.
So with this note, we will end this session. Good night, good day, good morning, wherever you are. And see you again next week, same time, same day.